Fotini, welcome to the Visionary Life podcast. I'm about halfway through your brand new book right now. And oh my goodness, I had no idea that the topic of negotiation actually interested me so much. And it's been fun to actually read through it and to actually reflect back on the times in my life when I could have used your frameworks to maybe inch closer towards what I really wanted, whether that was when I was negotiating for my first salary in my 20s, when I first got a corporate job, we'll call it, or even thinking back to like little moments as a kid when I really wanted a dog and I could have negotiated with my parents, but I didn't even know of this word at the time. So, first off, welcome to the show and thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. And honestly, that is music to my ears to hear that I've converted you in terms of interest in the subject of negotiation, because the goal is to make everybody realize that there's opportunities around us every day.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too, like once you become aware of it, that negotiation exists in our daily living situation, you want to learn more about it because you see how it can actually get you further in life or actually advance your own vision or mission for your life. And it kind of reminds me, so I used to practice as a nutritionist, and a lot of people walk around feeling low energy and they don't understand why they can't get the most out of their day or get to the gym. And then as soon as you make them aware of nutrition and nutrients and energy, they're like, oh, I got to learn more about this. Same thing with negotiation. It's like, wait, you mean this is something that I've been ignoring for the last 30 or 40 years of my life that I could be pulling from to, personally advance my life in a better direction, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned the nutrition piece, because that's all little choices that add up. And the same is true when you think about your negotiation opportunities. It's little choices in terms of how you communicate with people. It's little choices in when you speak up and when you don't, or when you are silent, or when you take that time to listen instead of reacting to stuff. So those little tiny moments are what add up to huge results.
I feel like that kind of goes with anything in life too. It's like it's in the
Yeah.
little food decisions you make. I was just chatting with a happiness expert yesterday, and she said happiness is literally those micro moments in your day of joy, joy, joy. That contributes to the word happiness. And same thing with negotiation. It's those little choices, as you say. So, to set the stage, let's learn about you as a child. So, you were nicknamed the negotiator as a kid. And in the dedication of your book, you actually say, to my family who sealed my fate by giving me loads of negotiation practice. I kind of giggled. Tell us about what it was like growing up in your family and why negotiation was an essential tool in your toolkit.
Well, I feel like I'm aging myself now, but if you've ever seen the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, that is my life to a T. So when you grow up in a strict immigrant household and you have a strict big fat Greek dad, you have to negotiate to get the heck out of the house, whether it was going to see your friends or going to the movies or going to university later. There was all of these opportunities where if I wanted to participate in these what we would call normal activities, it really was a battle every single time. I would have to deal with my father and sometimes my mom, but usually my dad. So it was about being stealth about how to do it. And upon reflection, I was using a lot of the same negotiation techniques that I teach people today. And that's one of the many reasons why I tell people you can learn a lot from children when it comes to negotiating. But even so, I was a more assertive kid than I would say most other people were. And so there were definitely been moments where I was the youngest one who was pushed to the front and said, you ask them, it'll be easier coming from you. You're the cute one, or you're the young one, or you're the one that's acceptable to talk back from, or any of those things. And so that my dad really did nickname me the negotiator. There were moments where he said, we didn't ask to hear from you, negotiator. And to this day, I think just in the last year, he said it to me as well. So it is something that stuck, but it was something that I felt I needed to do for my own satisfaction growing up. But it was also something I learned to do because that was an example that was provided to me by my parents, especially my father, because that was part and parcel of our upbringing. It's like I watched him negotiate for everything. I had to go to work with him in essence when he was delivering coffee to restaurants because he was a distributor. So I watched him have those deals in the kitchen with people. I watched him go to the car dealership and negotiate. I went with him to the bank, and we weren't allowed to stay at home alone as one of our strict upbringing issues. So it was just one of those things where you learn by osmosis too, of, you know, these are the ways things are done. And so that for me was normal, whereas I understand others don't necessarily have some of those role models or don't necessarily translate those role models into their world. For me, I was like a sponge and going, oh, I can do this over here, and I can do this with my teacher, and I can do this with my sister, and so on. So there was lots of examples and lots of opportunities to practice.
I love that. And obviously, you were kind of like a student of the whole process. You were studying your dad in action and really like soaking it in like a sponge. Did you ever have intentions to like flip this into a career as an adult? Or like, when did you start to realize that this could be something you devoted your life's work to?
It really happened accidentally. I don't think any person goes, I'm going to be a negotiator when I grow up, because I didn't even know it was a thing. But I did my MBA in organization behavior, and from there I was recruited into L'Oreal and other large organizations like that. And so I was put into positions where, you know, when I was interviewing with L'Oreal, I recall them saying, oh no, like we usually recruit MBAs to go into marketing, but I feel like there's an opportunity here, and they put me in sales instead. And so it was somebody else always kind of picking up on some of the skill sets that I had and putting me in these scenarios where I was practicing them that led to where I am now. And even when I was going through personal development programs at these institutions where I was working, I'd have the trainer pull me aside and go, you need to be doing something else. And I'd be like going, what is it? What do you tell me? And then it was a company that was hired to train us to be better negotiators, where they said, you should really be doing what we do. And I was like, yeah, sure. Someday when I've got more experience, because I was still in my 20s. Yeah. And he said, no, seriously, you should be doing what we do. And so they hired me, and I joined this training company, training everybody from CEOs of billion-dollar oil and gas corporations to junior account managers in a manufacturing facility, all of those folks in the middle. And that's when I was like lighting up and going, oh, I get to do all this stuff that I was learning to do, negotiating with Walmart and negotiating in retail and all of those things that I was doing growing up. And now I get to teach other people to do it and have better conversations. So I just feel like in my world, I didn't intend to do it. It was more like, okay, I'm good at this. I'm going to keep doing it. Someone's invited me to an opportunity, and I'm going to say yes. And it was one opportunity after another. And even that's how the opportunity to teach came up. So I teach part-time when I have the time in my calendar at the Schulich School of Business, and teaching MBA students has been such a joy. And that again came up because someone said, hey, are you interested in doing this? You seem to have a knack for it. And I was like, sure, sign me up. And that's even how the book came up. So HarperCollins saw a video of me online somewhere and said, we think you have a book in you. And I was like, okay. So I just feel like it's being open to opportunities and being open to the feedback and open to saying yes to things when they came up that has really driven so much of my career and where I am now.
It's such an interesting lesson too, that on the flip side, if you see somebody exuding a skill set that maybe they don't see in themselves, to actually compliment them on it, or to, you know, be like those people and those mentors in your life who have reached out to you and kind of said, hey, you're sitting on a book here, or hey, you should join our negotiation team. Because like you were kind of mentioning, you didn't necessarily know that that was your next step. That wasn't in your master plan. But for those people to have kind of like pulled you along and said, like, I think there's something here, I think that's a good reminder to all of us. Like, if you see somebody who's shining brilliantly in one of their skill sets, like tell them, or if you have an opportunity that you could share with them, because it sounds like that's kind of what got you along the path.
Yeah, and you know, that's one of the joys of doing what I do, is I get to give people feedback as well. So when I'm running training courses for corporate clients, or, you know, things of that nature, when I'm coaching somebody, to be able to tell them, oh, that was something that you did really well, is just as valuable as telling somebody, here's something you need to improve. So that feedback loop is so important. And I'd say it goes a step further. Like I was fortunate to have people in my world who were recognizing some of my skills, but I've also been getting better at asking for that feedback and helping myself along and coaching others to do the same thing, to go ask for it. If you don't know what you're doing right or wrong, how are you going to improve? And I once had a manager who, as soon as I said I was interested in personal development and I always want to improve, I have this hunger for, you know, improving. He was like, great, here's all the things you need to improve. And we spent nearly 2 hours, about an hour and 45 minutes in my personal development plan meeting with him telling me what I need to improve. And I had to stop him and go, is there anything that I've done right? And I knew I had because I was a high potential employee. I was bringing in loads of business. I was hitting all of my bonus metrics and all of that stuff. And he was like, "Oh yeah, you're doing tons of stuff." Well, then you need to tell me, because if you don't tell me those things, I'm not going to, I'm not going to feel very great about it. I don't know what to build on. But also, you're my champion at the senior leadership table. So if all you're doing is thinking about these things that I'm doing wrong, then that's not going to help me at all. So what is it that I'm doing well? And I don't know how I came to that aha moment, or how long I had been doing it before I realized that this was something I needed to pull out of people. But there's the balance of, yes, accepting a compliment and that feedback from people, but also making sure you get the appropriate feedback, not just the negative stuff all the time.
Absolutely. Such a good point. So I want to kind of break your book down a little bit, chapter by chapter. So starting with the basics, which is chapter 1, I'm curious, can you first tell the listener like the basics of why we should all learn the art of negotiation? What's the point?
Yeah, the point is simply that you can reduce your stress, you can increase your wealth, you can make your own life better. You can take control of your own circumstances when you recognize that there are opportunities abounding everywhere for you to make those tiny improvements. So I think there's a misconception that negotiation is all about money, or that negotiation is always combative, or that negotiation always takes place only in the boardroom. And what I try to shed light on is the fact that it happens all around us. And it's not just about cash. It is about little tiny things that are going to make your life better. It is reducing stress that leaves you now mental space to achieve so much more in terms of whether it's wealth, whether it's early retirement, whether it's, managing that temper tantrum from your kid so it ends a lot faster. All of those things are opportunities where you can use negotiation skills to make life a little bit easier. And it doesn't have to be intimidating or daunting or any of those kind of negative associations that come along with it.
You've mentioned a couple examples, kind of like negotiating with your kids or retiring early. What are a few other examples that the listener probably doesn't realize that they could be negotiating in their life, or where they're already doing it and could get better? But what would be some of those day-to-day negotiation scenarios that you want to remind them that this is negotiation?
Yeah, it's even some stuff like preventing burnout. Like right now, in a world where we have been dealing with COVID and working from home and all of those other challenges for over a year, I think Adam Grant used the word languishing is kind of where we are.
Yeah.
We're running out of steam, but there's still these moments every single day where people are asking something of you and you're like, oh God, I can't do this one more thing. One more thing on my plate is just going to make me break. Well, you can use your negotiation skills to go, sure, if you can help me with this other thing, then I'd be happy to help you with your project. Or if you can remove something else from my plate, then I'd be happy to work with you on this. So at work, it's really about balancing your workload and those tasks that are coming your way. At home, it's stuff like your partner, your spouse, your brother, your sister, your parents, whomever it is that you have to spend time with. Do you want to spend your time arguing about something, or do you want to spend your time actually coming to an agreement on stuff? So the way that you communicate with these people can eliminate, a 30-minute argument into a 5-minute conversation. You can find ways to actually enjoy talking about these things and looking for solutions versus bracing yourself for a very difficult conversation, or perhaps even avoiding each other and letting something fester for a really long time. There are so many of those opportunities at home, especially now when everyone's at their wits' end, when everyone is emotionally very reactive because we're so depleted of all of our energy and our self-control. Well, if you can use some of these communication techniques in the book, it'll just make those everyday conversations so much easier about, who's going to take out the garbage, or who's going to manage getting the kids dressed and masked, all that kind of stuff to go outside, or whose family are we going to bubble with? How do we dissect that? How do we have a fruitful conversation, a solution-oriented conversation about some of the challenges that we're facing at home today? Who's going to manage the schedule for the morning versus the afternoon shift and not get Zoom bombed on their next meeting? Those are all little tiny conversations and negotiations that we could be having that we tend to overlook, but they can reduce our stress so dramatically.
It reminds me of a quote that I've heard, and it says, your life will greatly improve as a result of the amount of hard conversations you're willing to have. And it sounds like those hard conversations that they're speaking about in that quote could actually become maybe a little easier or a little more effortless with the art of negotiation. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I really love that quote, and I would definitely amend it and say they don't have to be quite so hard when you approach them in a certain way.
Yeah.
And so often the people I meet go, I don't negotiate or I don't like negotiating, but they don't necessarily understand what it is comprised of and how it can help. So instead of avoiding those hard conversations, it's going, oh, it's actually not that hard. Actually, I might enjoy it. I might even look forward to this conversation because I've got loads of questions that I'm ready to ask, or I've got now a new mindset of curiosity instead of dread. And that can be a game changer from the very beginning.
And I wonder, because I've heard a lot of people say that too, like, I don't like negotiating. And I wonder if it's because they associate negotiation with that combative or aggressive type of conversation. And I think, that's perhaps why people avoid the topic altogether. I'm curious, why is it that so many of us avoid negotiation? Is it because we don't truly know what it is, or because most of us have had negative experiences with it? And I think you mentioned in the book, it's particularly women who avoid negotiation, who are the majority of listeners of this podcast. So why are we avoiding it?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both of those things. So first of all, it's definitely that we are fed these subconscious messages, whether it's from public figures like Donald Trump, or social or pop culture kind of references of the Wall Street kind of bro who goes in there and is fast talking and slick haired and gets everything that he wants. And I tell people, actually, introverts, you can rejoice, because those are not the people that get the best deals. And those are not reflected of 99% of the conversations that we have, or the negotiations that we have in everyday life. So it's a matter of misunderstanding what negotiation truly is. And it's also this matter of misunderstanding that you do it more often than you realize. And when you can tap into the fact and the awareness that you are doing it and build on some of those really great skills, then becomes much easier to reinforce again some of those great habits. But I do think it starts with that misconception of what negotiation truly is and what a successful negotiation truly is. I'd say maybe less than 1% of the negotiations that I deal with, and I get hired by Fortune 50 companies who have billions of dollars on the line, or 100 million in one deal, or whatever is happening. Those are never the combative bang your fists on the table kind of opportunities that come up. It is very much using problem solving techniques and questioning techniques and conflict management techniques to make things more smooth, instead of getting people riled up or feeling like they need to get into this combative boxing match scenario. So as soon as that perception changes, then all of a sudden it becomes much easier. I will say that I do think women are speaking up more than they used to. I think they are, and I'm sure there's statistics to back this up. But there is a legitimate hesitation, because despite the fact that we are doing it more often, we are still being treated differently in negotiation. So there's a legitimate fear of repercussions or of responses that is holding women back specifically as well. And so part of, the toolkit that I put together in this book is how to mitigate a lot of that risk, both with the mindset, with communication techniques and all of the rest of it. My goal is for this to be a book for everybody, as opposed to, I learned, and I think you read in the book at the very beginning, I learned the hard way that what works for a tall white male won't necessarily work for me. And so the goal of this book is to make it easy for everybody to negotiate.
And I love that you've recognized that what works for this person will not work for me. And I do a lot of work with marketing strategy for small business. And what I've realized is that there is no one right marketing strategy for anyone, right? Like the whole be pushy, be very in your face with messaging, that may work for some businesses, but for other businesses, they need a softer approach to marketing, a more empathetic and really showcasing their personality and their warmth and the way they love on their customers. I'm curious, with negotiation, is it similar that we kind of need to infuse our own personality, or when negotiating, do we need to follow certain scripts and certain templates in order to be successful at it?
So it's another one of those combination answers. There are guideposts for us in negotiation. Nothing is ever black and white. And so I do have a section in the book at the end called Scripts That Work. But again, those are scripts that work for everybody, not just for one specific group. When you look for the lowest common denominator of dominance, if you will, so the people who are in a group where I know they're going to be treated differently or perhaps with a condescending tone. If I look for a script that works for them, that's going to work for everybody. But the reverse is not true. What works for the privileged group doesn't necessarily work for everybody else. So I like it to think of it as, my analogy in the book is, it's the stairs versus the on-ramp. So the majority of our society, of our population, can use the stairs. Most of them are able-bodied people who can do that. But everybody, regardless of whether you're in a wheelchair or walking on 2 feet, can use the on-ramp. So the goal of the book, in the guideposts that I give you, is that this is the on-ramp for everybody. So there is this element of, yes, there are some scripts that work, but they're not black and white. And I'd say I'd layer on top of that what you alluded to, which is authenticity. And for me, I will never tell somebody to say something that is out of character for them, because it's going to fail miserably. If you are trying to spew something out that is out of character at a subconscious level, they're going to be reading into it going, something's off. This doesn't feel right to me. And that's going to affect the level of trust between you and how this whole thing plays out. So, I mean, I've had lots of folks say to me, can I just put a little bug in my ear and then you can tell me what to say when I go in there? And that would be a lot of fun, but it probably wouldn't work, because if you don't have the mindset of being able to handle it on your own, with your own authentic presence and self, even what I tell you to say is going to come out a jumbled mess. And the other thing is, I'm not there with you in the room. I can't pick up on all of the signals that they're sending you. I'm not reading the look on their faces the way you are. So you have to also take that into account and then blend that with your authenticity and some of the guidelines that I provide in the book and that I talk about. So it's this combination of bringing your best self for that moment. The same way we have a wardrobe full of clothes, 99% of which I have not used in the last year, but you're going to choose the outfit for the moment. It's still part of your wardrobe. It's still a reflection of you, but I'm just encouraging people to choose that best wardrobe for that moment in time. So by giving you a few more outfits to try on, then you can choose the one that you think is going to work best for you.
Yeah, I love that analogy of the stairs versus the on-ramp. So thank you for sharing that. Now, kind of moving ahead into chapter 2, you actually talk about the importance of power in successful negotiations. And I think that's another word that freaks us out, especially as women entrepreneurs, women in the workplace. What does it mean to have power in a negotiation? And what if we don't feel like very powerful when we show up to negotiate a new salary?
Yeah, so power is an interesting one, because it's not just actual power that matters, it's perceived power. So you can have all of the power in the world, but if you show up looking like you are scared or weak or don't have the skills to provide to me the service that I need, if you show up looking meek and weak, I'm going to assume you have no power, and I'm likely going to get more aggressive. That's what studies show us, and that's what just human behavior tells us. So the actual power you have doesn't matter on its own. You need to match it with the perceived power. And again, you could be somebody who puffs out their chest and pretends to be super, super confident, but if there's no substance behind that and no actual power behind that, well, then that's going to also fail you as well. So it's a combination of the two that matters. And where power comes from is often overlooked. So power comes from that perception. It's just showing up with your best self. It also comes with your resources. You often have more power than you realize. And this is a lesson that I feel like I'm constantly beating into my poor MBA students who will be negotiating for a new job offer. And they go, they could go to the 500 other people who applied to this. And my response back is, but they chose you. They chose you for a reason. And that in itself is quite powerful. What is it that you bring to the table? What resources, what skills, what know-how, what demeanor, what are all of these things that you are bringing to the table that makes them go, I want to deal with this person. And if you can tap into that, then that is a very powerful thing, because at a subconscious level, you're now going to start to show up like you deserve to be there. And when you show up like you deserve to be there, you will absolutely get better results. And so it's thinking about that stuff of, why are they talking to me today? Why are they giving me the time of day? What is it that is compelling them to want to connect with someone like me? I'm clearly bringing something to the table that they want. And so you have to remind yourself of that. And then you may also have to remind them of that as well, to change their perceptions. If they're treating you as if, you're disposable, or there's 10 other people who could do what you do, well, then you may have to remind them and go, here's what sets me apart from some of the others. Here's what you may not know about some of the things that I have done. And that now can increase that power between you as well.
So a lot of it really starts with knowing what you are innately good at and what you bring to the table and what those maybe unique skills that only you have, is recognizing those in yourself, and that allows you to show up with confidence, which leads to perceived power. Is that kind of a good overview?
100%. And I mean, I tell people there's little ways that you can help yourself in that manner. So I have a habit of in my Outlook folders, I have a folder called my feel good folder, and I've talked about this a lot. And the feel good folder is anytime someone pays you a compliment, anytime somebody gives you accolades, anytime you get a thank you from somebody, I put it in my feel good folder. And so if you are having moments of doubt or you're going, why would they be talking to me? You can now go into that folder and go, oh, here's all the reasons they're talking to me, because I've done really nice things for them, because I excelled on a project, because they know that nobody else is going to be able to go to the lengths that I will go to. So there's some really great reminders to pump yourself up, and then be able to articulate that in someone else's words, in their own words, is immensely more powerful. Because when it comes out of their mouth and you're reminding them that it came out of their mouth and you're quoting them, well, now their ego has to match that. And they go, well, if I said she's great, then I need to believe she's great, so I better treat her like she's great. There's all of these really wonderful things that happen when you can take inventory of all of those things.
So good. I love that. So kind of moving on a little bit, one of the chapters you talk about this principle of people over spreadsheets, and you explain the power of human relationships. And this is something I am so passionate about too, because I feel like, we're not meant to do life alone. We're not meant to just live in the four walls of our office and try to like achieve success and get everything out that we want out of life. Like, we need to make human connection with people and not just, talk to screens all day, and actually, foster relationships. I just think a lot can come with that. So I'm curious, can you share some relationship building secrets that can actually help us to negotiate more successfully, and how those are connected?
Yeah, I mean, if this year has taught us anything, is that we crave relationships and that we need people. Isolation is very dangerous for a lot of folks. And so that is a testament to the need for the human element of negotiation, and that we don't negotiate with spreadsheets, we negotiate with people. I would say that where I lean on most, and I bring this up specifically for women's groups all the time too, are in the principles of likability. So in the persuasion and influencing world, the science behind likability is an interesting one. Too often, one of the biggest mistakes I see people making in negotiation is giving up value for the sake of being liked. Because as you said, we're not meant to wander this world alone. We were meant to, even our cave person ancestry, be part of a tribe. And so we want people to like us. That is built into our innate needs. And yet I see people going, well, I'm just going to give them what they want because I don't want them to hate me. I want them to like me. But that is a dangerous thing to do. Instead, it's focusing on the likability before the negotiation starts. It's going to set you up for success. And that comes from three major things. One of them is finding something in common. So what do you have in common with this person? And it could be a mutual acquaintance. It could be where you both went to school. It could be that you both love the color red. It doesn't matter what it is, but those teeny tiny minor things that you have in common are like building mini bridges between you and bonding you. And so we like people that have something in common with us. We also like people who pay us genuine compliments. And I say genuine because we can smell a rat. Right? If you showed up to the car dealership and you're in the middle of negotiating something and all of a sudden they go, I like the look of your face. You go, wait, I know some sleazy things coming next. So we like genuine compliments, and we like them before the business begins. And then we also like people who are cooperative. So if you are demonstrating that you are in a conversation with me instead of banging your fist on a table, if you are asking me great questions, if you are taking the time to listen to what I have to say, all of those things, and you are demonstrating it to me, if I can see those things intuitively, I'm going to like you more, and I'm going to want to find reasons to deal with you. My entire business exists today because of the relationships that I built with people. So I quit my job almost 7 years ago, and I accidentally went to self-employment. What I didn't realize is leading up to the day that I quit, I had been building relationships with all of these wonderful clients, many of whom I now call friends. And it wasn't because I was intending to go into business with myself. I had zero plans. When you grow up in a self-employed family, you'd never want to touch self-employment ever again. So I was just going, how can I keep serving these people? I trained them on a workshop. We connected on LinkedIn. I started posting articles that I thought were valuable. So I was providing value to my network. When I met with them, it wasn't just me spewing at them and telling me, here's all the great things I'm going to do for you today. It was listening to their problems and learning more about their family lives and the challenges that they were facing at work. And so because I had been doing all those things, the day I quit and I announced it on LinkedIn, I had so many messages from people going, what can I do to help? And when are you going to come work with us again?
Yep.
And I would say, I don't work for that company anymore. And they said, we didn't hire the company. We hired Fotini. And so I thought that when they said, hey, we really want you to keep working with our team, or we want your help on this project, I thought, okay, I'll just do this one friend a favor until I have to get a real job. And 7 years later, and a book and a speaking career, it's a real job. So all of that existed, though, because I was spending time building relationships with these people, not for any other intention, but I just really like people and I really like them. So by building that, that made them want to deal with me over somebody else. And so that is the value of what thinking about people can do for you.
It's so important. And it reminds me, I used to work in sales and marketing for a health food company. So we would go into major grocery stores or health food stores, and my nature was just to basically find the buyer for the department and be like, all right, so we have this new product and you need to list it on the shelf and here's the pricing sheet. But when I would go with my colleagues who had been much more established in sales, they would walk in and they would be like, hey, I saw on Facebook that you recently got a dog. I have a dog too. And they would bring them a coffee and they would always like compliment them and really find all these common factors. And I would always stand there like as the young sales rep and be like, just get to the point, like move it. Like we got many accounts to service. And looking back on it, I realized why my success rates were so much lower, because I wasn't fostering that likability factor with the most important person in the store, which was the buyer on behalf of the brand. And so, looking back on those times, I'm like, oh yeah, the sales reps that had the most success, they were the most likable. They always found common ground in their conversations. They never started with the pitch or here's the new product. It was 10 to 20 minutes just in establishing a relationship and getting to know the person or catching up with the person. And to this day, I carry that through in my business. When somebody wants to jump on a call to see if they want to hire me as their marketing strategist, I'm spending a lot of the call just kind of asking them questions, paying their business compliments, because I genuinely enjoy doing that now. And I realize it's not about rushing into the sales part of the conversation. I will have way more success if I start with this likability factor and then we talk about their challenges and their pain points and go from there.
Oh yeah, I love that you picked up on that, because it's, if you can get to know somebody first when it is time to do your pitch, right? When it is time to go through that motion that we have to do, you've now learned so much about it, you can tailor it to them. And now it's not about doing it in a manipulative way. It's about understanding, oh, this is how I can serve them better. And now you're actually providing a better product or service as a result of having listened to them, as a result of creating that likability between you. And that means you're going to have more, it's going to stick more, and you're more likely to be successful and probably long-term successful with that particular individual, because we will find excuses to work with people we like. The odd time that we have to work with someone we don't like, we'll look for every excuse to find a replacement as soon as possible. So I think it's really interesting that you can find those parallels to your early career as well.
And kind of to wrap up that, you have, I think it's a study in your book, and it basically said there was this group of 2 MBA groups, and they were told, before you begin negotiating, exchange some personal information with each other, identify a similarity. And then the other group was told, get straight down to business, like don't do the relationship building stuff. And it said in the group that got right down to business, 55% of members managed to reach an agreement. But in the group that built relationships first, they got to an agreement 90% of the time. So almost double by just spending time finding that common ground. So I think it's so important.
And not only that, not only did they get more deals, because some people will go, oh, sure, like now that you like them, you're probably giving them everything that they want. They got better deals. So those deals were 12% greater in value than the group who only hit deals 55% of the time. So you close more deals and you close better deals as a result of building that relationship and that likability factor.
Mm-hmm. So, in another part of your book, you actually talk about the art of negotiation and the fact that it's not just about the words spoken, but it's also about your tone of voice as well as your body language. So, it's like there's this, three-tiered approach to the art of a successful negotiation. So, I'm curious, can you expand on why it's not just about our words and how we can actually use our tone of voice and our body language to be better negotiators?
Yeah, I'd say the best proof of that is the fact that when we write emails or text messages, we have a million and one emojis and acronyms now to choose from because we know that there's a good chance we could be misinterpreted. So I might add an LOL on the end of it or a smiley face or
Yes.
whatever, right? Because you don't want to be misinterpreted.
Nope.
All of that happens because I can't hear the sound of your voice and I can't see the genuine look on your face. And so if I'm left to just the words, when you strip all the other communication elements away, it's dangerous territory. And when the stakes are highest, then you don't want to be misinterpreted, right? And so often now we're trying to lean on emails more and more and text messages more and more, but that leaves so much more room for misinterpretation. So we could have an email and then be misinterpreted over that email and now have to send 5 more emails back and forth to clear up the misunderstanding from the first email. Or we could just pick up the phone or jump on a Zoom for 5 minutes and prevent all of that annoying back and forth stuff. So it's when I can see the genuine look of concern or smile on your face. Now I might engage with you a little bit more. I might like you a little bit more. When I can hear the soothing tone in your voice or the sternness or authority in your voice, I might change how I respond to you. And in fact, there was a really interesting study down in the US where surgeons were given communication training. What they found was surgeons were being sued for malpractice, and that's far more common in the US than it is anywhere else, I think, in the world. And so what they realized is those who were being sued were not necessarily the ones making the most mistakes. When they gave them communication training, they saw the number of lawsuits go down significantly. When they started speaking to them like a person and not a chart, when they started changing the sound of their voice and their soothing tone or not, now all of a sudden people responded to them differently and weren't having this defensiveness or need to take it out on them in that moment. So the fact that you can change the outcome of lawsuits and save money in that sense significantly by changing the sound of your voice, and not in an inauthentic way, because again, I recall having a colleague once who every single time we would go in to speak to a client, he would stand up at the board or the PowerPoint deck or whatever it is, and all of a sudden he'd go into this voice where it was like, all right, now I'm in presentation mode. And people would look at each other kind of funny and go, who is this guy? What the hell just happened? And it was really strange and inauthentic. So it's about continuing to be authentic in your true self, but then turning up the volume where you need to on your empathy, on your credibility, on your authority, on whatever the moment requires of you. And that can go a really long way because it will eliminate some of that misinterpretation. And today, when we're doing so much virtually as well, and a lot of people have Zoom fatigue, we just have to be so much more mindful of those additional elements. If you are going to rely on email, it's making sure that before you press send, you press pause and go, is there anything here that should be that could be misinterpreted? Is there a way for me to build in some likability at the beginning or the end of this email? There's those moments that you can use to your advantage instead of just reacting or moving too quickly and ignoring some of those crucial elements of communication.
Mm-hmm. And you're right. Through this virtual world, it is a little bit more challenging to showcase like your energy. I think a lot is lost through the Zoom
Yeah.
call. Whereas if I was out for coffee with you, I would be kind of like using my hands and you would be able to see my body language. So I even think like for anyone who does Zoom calls for a living, essentially, like you have to show up almost that much bigger. It's not just in the
Yeah.
words you're saying, but like you've got to have those intonations in your voice and still think about your body language because you're still watching me right now. So like, can you use your hands and maybe, like use what you got basically.
Yeah.
And knowing that a lot can be lost through a digital screen, you almost have to show up like 20% bigger and brighter just to convey that point. So I think that's a really good point. And I'm curious then, would you suggest in this world where it's not just about our words, but about our tone of voice and our body language. Is it advantageous if we're doing digital negotiating to do it with video on versus video off instead of like over email? Like, should we be pressing record on ourselves to have hard conversations so people can see our body language and really hear us rather than just doing like an exchange of emails? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So generally speaking, even pre-pandemic and pre-virtual, I always encourage people to get off of email and do more and more face-to-face if they can, when the situation is natural to do so. It's not unusual to see salary negotiations, for example, or any type of contract stuff to start over email because they're going to send you over some type of document. And the temptation is to continue doing it that way and going, well, here's some things I need to tweak. And that's where I tell my MBA students and my clients, pause and go, hey, I have a few questions. This would probably be much faster if we could have a quick call versus a ton of back and forths.
Awesome.
And that can certainly resolve a ton. We also want to be mindful of, sometimes it's weird to do things face to face. And maybe if I've never seen you, it would be weird for me to I don't know, to have a face to face meeting with you if we would never do it in real life. But now we also have this opportunity. It's a double-edged sword. So it's about being mindful of Zoom fatigue. But it's, and some people these days don't want to do it because they're like, I have kids screaming behind me. I've got, people working from home. It's chaos around here. I don't want to have my office clean all the time. So it's about being mindful and maybe empathetic about that as well. But where possible, I'd say definitely take it off of email and use that opportunity, if you can, to do let's call it a virtual face-to-face or even just a telephone call. Because I feel like we've gone from extremes of email to 100% face-to-face and forgotten that the phone still exists. There is something in between if one of those two things feels unnatural to you.
Oh, yeah. I am loving a good phone call lately. Sometimes I'll message my clients or just people who I'm having connection calls with, and I'm like, can we just do this on phone instead so that I can be walking around or not be staring at my screen? And you forget that talking on the phone is actually a great alternative to being on Zoom or, like you said, being on email. So it's a good reminder.
And imagine in what kind of a better mood you'll be in if you can walk and talk outside versus being glued to this camera. You want to have people in a good mood when they're dealing with you. You don't want them necessarily distracted and doing 10 other things. So I will be mindful of when people are going to be driving. I prefer not to have intense conversations, but a chit chat, fine. But it's also being mindful of all of those things. What can I do to make this conversation easier for that other person and for me?
Absolutely. Besides the tips that we've covered already, I'm curious, are there any other simple tips or tools for improving our negotiation skills that you want to share with the listeners?
One of the most common ones and most overlooked ones, and I'd say this will be great for a lot of those entrepreneurs out there, and especially the women, is to shut up. It sounds counterintuitive. It sounds really counterintuitive, but the book is full of counterintuitive techniques. And it is because we can often talk ourselves out of a deal. And so taking the time to just pause for a moment and absorb and digest what they've just said to you, taking the time to own your presence in that space and go, I need a moment to think that through before you think and talk at the same time. Those are all going to serve you so well and make you look far more confident. Too often the misconception is, well, if I leave those blank moments, they're going to think I'm stupid or I'm going to look silly. No, in fact, if you own that moment and you go, I need a second, now they're going to go, oh, if she needs a second, I must have said something really interesting, or whatever's about to come out of her mouth next is going to be really good, or she's thinking about what I just said, so I feel really good that she's acknowledging me right now. In fact, it can do all of these wonderful things and help you build trust and build credibility. And imagine if you're uncomfortable with that silence. Imagine how much more uncomfortable they are because you're doing it intentionally now. You're taking your time to do it. You're being mindful about it. And if they're uncomfortable with it, the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to start talking to fill the silence and give you loads of information. And information is so powerful. So I'd say shut up more often. Press your mental pause button and take the time to absorb what's going on, to think through before you speak, and to acknowledge the other person and give them that space to tell you whatever it is that they need to share.
Yeah, and I know you share lots of good tips on this exact topic in the book. So let's talk about the book. It is So good. Like I said, I'm halfway through it and I've been really loving what I'm seeing. I love the end of chapter summaries where I can kind of digest it all really, really quickly. So let's hear about the book and who is it perfect for? Like, who needs to be reading this book?
I know everybody hates to hear this answer, but it is for everyone.
That's a
um,
marketer's worst nightmare to hear
yeah,
that.
it is
I
the
get
worst answer.
it.
But I mean, it's that on ramp, right? It is meant to be for everybody. So for that person who doesn't see themselves in those, Wall Street and Trump type books, it's for that person who goes, yeah, I do some of that, but I also do other stuff. It's for that person who goes, I don't know, these things make me uncomfortable. It's for every single one of you to find opportunities to reduce your stress in life and get what you want. Anybody who wants to get what they want should be picking up this book.
Exactly. And it is called Say Less, Get More. Love the title. So concise, so
Thank you.
memorable too. And, like you said, it's a very practical book. Like you were sharing stories about how one time you had to go to the hospital and they weren't paying attention to you and how you advanced yourself in the triage. So it's, for parents, it's for people like myself who are starting their own businesses and are going to be in a lot of conversations with others. It's for people who are negotiating their first or next salary. So I love the practicality of it. And one thing that you did so well in the book is the storytelling. You start every chapter with stories of negotiation in practice. And I was reading a lot of these stories going, oh, yeah, there's negotiation in that. Like, again, going back to the hospital story, I didn't realize that you getting yourself triaged ahead of others, there was negotiation in that. So tons of awesome wisdom that you share. I'm assuming you put a lot of hard work into this book. How was the process of writing a book?
I think anybody, and I appreciate all those compliments. I'm so thrilled to hear that you enjoyed the storytelling because that's, I think, what makes it most engaging. I would say any author will tell you it is an exhausting process. I finished writing this book over a year ago, and
What?
yeah, so it's a long process when you're working with a major publisher, and there's a lot of steps in between getting it to finally to shelves. But I was doing it while I was working full time, training people, doing keynotes, running consulting projects. I did a lot of writing on airplanes, which was actually one of my favorite places to write because you could tune out all of the little dings from your email coming through. But it was pretty joyous too, as exhausting and taxing as it could be at times, or you want to bang your head on the table because the words aren't coming out. It also forced me to go back into my archives. And so many of the stories come from, with permission, from my students and audience members who have been sending me emails and direct messages and reflection papers in their assignments where they're sharing these little success stories. So not all of the stories in there are mine, some of them are, but some of them come from others who've been implementing the stuff I've been talking about for so many years. So that for me was like, it was unbelievably rewarding. Like as I was writing the epilogue, I was brought to tears because it was just so amazing to be summarizing all of these amazing things that people have been accomplishing. So as exhausting and awful as it was at times, I'd say overall the experience was pretty magical to be able to reflect on what people have managed to do as a result of just changing tiny little things and getting a lot more out of life.
What an awesome experience. And yeah, we'll have to get a whole other podcast in on this book writing process because I know a lot of our listeners, that's on their vision board to one day write a book, but they just feel like that would be so daunting. Like thinking about how to write 350 pages worth of words is crazy, but congratulations. And I know you're in a launch phase right now, right?
Yeah, I feel like I've never spent as much time on social media in my life, but it's been amazing to hear the reception of it. People excited to get it and sharing pictures and sharing posts, and now I'm starting to get reviews coming in. So it's been so rewarding. But it's it's exhausting to launch a
I
book. I think
imagine.
as exhausting as it is to write the book. I'm not sure which is
Yep.
more draining.
Well, it's just a season and it'll all be worth it. So tell our listeners, where can they find the book and where are the best ways to support you and your work?
Thank you for asking. It is available in all major retailers all over the world. We've seen it going everywhere from Singapore to Mexico.
Cool.
So if you, Amazon, of course, is one of the big ones, but in the US, Barnes and Noble, and in Canada, Indigo, and a lot of independent stores. If you go to the HarperCollins website, you'll find independent retailers listed there as well.
Awesome.
And you can find me on Instagram, where I'm sharing little nuggets all the time, at Fotini Icon, or on LinkedIn, where I often share articles and some similar nuggets there as well.
Amazing. Fotini, thank you so much for being on the Visionary Life podcast. This is a topic that in 170 episodes, we've never covered negotiation before. So thank you for sharing all of your wisdom with us.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.